us a martini.
We're good? Okay. All right. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the St. Helena Planning Commission for September 15th, 2015. But before we start, I would like to thank our firefighters, emergency personnel, CHP, and other safety officers for all that they're doing right now with the fire. I also want to thank our extremely generous community for how quickly we came together to help us all and everyone who is in need. We are an amazing and fortunate group of people, and let us keep that in mind tonight when we have this meeting. There are more important things in life, and than what's on tonight's agenda. And it's important to remember that every so often. And if Noah could lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, I would be most appreciated. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Present.
Commissioner Monette,
Here.
Commissioner Kistner,
Here.
Chairperson Parker.
Present. Moving on to public forum, this is an opportunity for the public to address the commission on items of interest to the public that are not listed on tonight's agenda. Because of restrictions imposed by the Brown Act, the commission may not engage in discussion nor take action on matters not described on the agenda. Please observe the time limit of 3 minutes. Would anyone like to speak at public forum? Seeing none, I will close the public forum and move on to our consent items. There are a few. Would anyone like to move them? We have the approval of the minutes, a design review exemption,
I would like
and
to,
a sign permit, and a consistency determination.
I would like to pull the, I think it's item 6. No, not item 6. No, item 6 is fine. Hold on.
Do you want to remove the sign permit?
No, it's the item 5.
Oh.
Yeah,
Item, the design review exemption for Spring Mountain Court.
yes.
Okay, we can move that to the public hearings. Would anyone else like to move a consent item?
Staff would like to pull item 7 for a presentation by the applicant and staff.
Okay. Do we have any notes or comments on the minutes? Okay, can I have a motion to,
I move that we approve the minutes of September the 1st.
with our additions or edits?
With our-
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Do we need to include item 6? There was another consent item. Should those be grouped together?
I was going to include that with the consent items. It's not edited out, so that would be 4 and 6. That would be, yes, the sign permit. We can
I
revise it.
amend a motion to include item number 6.
Second.
Commissioner Kistner,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Yes.
Commissioner Chairperson Parker.
Yes. All right, if we could get a staff report on item number 5, the design review exemption?
Thank you, Chair Parker. And I actually have a brief PowerPoint, just because there's the commission, this item was heard before the commission previously, on July 16th, and there were some questions regarding ownership of the adjacent access to the site, and so I prepared a brief PowerPoint just to clarify ownership and provide some information. The project before you is a design review exemption proposing to construct a 2-car carport in place of a previously approved 1-car carport and parking pad. And we'll just get the PowerPoint started and I'll go over the presentation. Just like I mentioned, there's a project description. This is a site plan identifying the proposed location of the 2-car carport. It does provide a 5-foot setback from the side yard and a 3-foot setback from the rear yard. This is the approved site plan. So in the bottom right corner, it shows a approved carport and parking space. So 2 cars will be accessing the property from the adjacent alleyway, which was in question at the previous review. And the proposal is to just expand the carport to cover the second parking space. Sorry for kind of the crudeness of this exhibit, but it's an existing assessor parcel map that shows the alley location, the project site. I drew it on, showing where it is in relation to the alley, highlighted here. This is a aerial photograph with the site, the parcel lines overlaid, and it's hard to see, but the parcel on this exhibit, which is also provided from the assessor's office, does not go fully across the adjacent property owner's property. So there was a question as to ownership of the alley. Is it as was identified in the AP map, or was it partial as identified in this aerial, which is what we looked at previously? The alley, we have determined the alley does go the full length of those properties, with the property in question, 1800 Spring Mountain, being the wedge-shaped parcel accessed off the cul-de-sac. It's got a wood roof there, so you can tell it's under construction. So the proposed design of the carport meets the setbacks for accessory structures. However, depending on the classification of the access, there were some potential additional setback requirements as discussed in the staff report, based on the fact that it is fully public ownership and it is not a city street. Staff finds that the project as proposed does meet the requirements of the accessory structure setbacks and is recommending approval, just bringing it back. So again, the request is for a 2-car carport in place of an approved 1-car carport and parking pad. So based on that, staff requests that the Planning Commission determine the project exempt from CEQA and accept the required findings and approve the design review exemption. Available for any questions. The property owners are here. I don't believe they have a presentation unless there's any questions.
Does anyone have any questions for staff at this time?
Yeah, I'm just confused. I don't understand the difference between a public alley and a public street. I mean, it's determined it is a public alley, but it is not a public street. So what kind of difference does that make in terms of how I'm supposed to be thinking about this?
So a public street is required to have a driveway with a 20-foot setback accessing it. So basically, a public street, if you're accessing your property from a public street, you're required to have an additional setback before your accessory structure. When coming off of an alley, you're not required that additional setback. And interestingly, this section of land that's public right-of-way actually doesn't meet any of the requirements because it does not provide secondary access to this site. It is the primary access, but this is how it was previously approved. Staff had concerns over a potential non-conforming or expanding non-conforming situation. We contacted the city attorney. Due to the fact that there is no question over the access, the applicant is proposing a modification to the approved design of the carport. The access question is not being asked, is not before the commission, and therefore there's no question regarding non-conformity of the structure. The structure is a 1-car carport currently approved, and they're requesting a 2-car carport where the access either way is for 2 cars. So there's no expansion of non-conforming. City attorney concurred with staff that basically the access is not in question, and so therefore we're recommending approval.
Okay, the other question is on the plans. The corner of the proposed 2-car carport is fewer than 3 feet. It's not 3 feet. Is that a problem?
Eaves are allowed to project into setbacks, so the support
eave.
posts will meet the setback requirements, and the property owner is very well aware of those requirements.
Okay. And I am assuming that some of the objections in the letter of objection we got, none of those are of interest to you, or
I've had, and I'm sorry I didn't mention that, I should have. I've had numerous conversations with the adjacent property owner, Mr. Baker. He's had some frustrations that from staff perspective are somewhat separate from the proposal before the commission. There's been an ongoing history, and he has some concerns over potential taxes paid on that the portion of the property that is an alley or public right-of-way that's a part of his property. That he'll take up with the assessor. He does object to the project. He understands staff's position, and we've had numerous discussions. He wasn't able to be here tonight because of other impacts that he's talked about in his letter. But he does request the commission deny the 2-car carport, but also requesting that the commission essentially ask the property owner to reconfigure the site to provide the 20-foot setback because of access concerns. However, staff does not feel that that's warranted by the commission given the analysis provided in the staff report.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Opening up the public comment, would anyone like to speak on this? Seeing, oh, all right. The applicant's going to come up.
The microphone on?
Is the green light on? No, that's the timer. We're going to take a quick break while we solve some technical issues. I think we need to do it on the mic, but we're going to close the public comment so that a commissioner can ask a procedural question.
Yes, I am wondering, since there are four of us, what happens if there's a tie vote on something, and what is considered a quorum?
A quorum is 3.
Okay, a quorum is 3. So what happens if there's a tie vote? It votes down, and that's what I thought. Yeah. All right, thank you. But all right, but a quorum is 3.
Yes. Regardless of how many people are here, if there's only 3, the quorum is still 3.
Okay, I'll start
Okay,
again.
and I'm going to
Can you
open
hear
up
me
the
now?
public comment again.
My name is Rod Ellison. I am the property owner at 1800 Spring Mountain Court. Noah has briefly and succinctly summarized our request to extend from an approved one-car carport to a two-car carport. We're basically asking to cover 2 cars instead of 1 in the same location. We've waited quite a while for this research outcome. It started all back in May, and our previous meeting before you was June 15th of this year. I'd like to thank Noah for your work you've done on this. It's been a tangled knot, I know. And now the research is complete, and the city's staff's conclusion is to recommend revision to a 2-car carport. We've already had continuances. We've complied with everything the city has asked for. Before we could move in and get a temporary occupancy permit, we were asked to take down the minimal structure we'd started on our 2-car carport, which was 4 posts and 4 ribs. We did that before the night before we moved in, and it is now sitting on the ground, ready to be put back together with your approval. Now we're asking that we get a favorable vote from you so we can move forward and finish our project and just complete what we started in building a beautiful home and a place to live in St. Helena. So I'd like to introduce Kirsty Garosa. She's here to fill in some of the blanks for me.
Hi, Noah, if you could just put the approved site plan up real fast. My name is Kirsty Gerosa, and I'm a land use planner. I work with Frella Braun and Martel, and I'm here with Quinn Artenson. He's our land use attorney working on this project. And the Ellisons contacted us in inquiry on what to do next when the review process was happening. And I have to hand it over to county or city staff and working on the other side of the fence for many years to find the research that went into to determine the actual scenario with the alleyway. It was quite a research project. So I think everyone was happy with the conclusion. So the reason why I wanted to put the approved site plan, I wanted to just give a brief history. This property has always had access from this alleyway. The previous house always accessed the rear portion of the property. And currently, the applicant is asking for the identical scenario, access from the alleyway and entering into a carport. Originally, when they got the Planning Commission approval, as you can see, it was just a 1-car covered. And with El Nino coming, you can imagine why they would want 2-car covered. And the only thing that's going to change is that it's going to have a cover. So the approval before you today is literally a cover over the second car. And I know one of the issues that the neighbor brought up, the neighbor driveway is directly across, so you can understand his concerns with backup ratio. And typically for a two-car, I'm an engineer by bachelor's degree. Typically for a two-car garage, typical garage is a 20 by 20 with a 20-foot backup. So you can enter into a two-lane road to come out of your garage and move forward. And so typically you want a 20 by 20 with a 20-foot backup. However, this acts as a single lane road. It's an alley. It's the last property accessed. Rarely will there be two cars on this alleyway. And they have the 3-foot setback and then a 12-foot right-of-way for a 15-foot backup ratio. Plenty of space for a car to pull out and pull through. So I can understand the neighbor's concern, if I was the neighbor also, with the impending driveway on the opposite side. You would be concerned that they would actually access the property. So the Ellisons have been practicing, and they've never accessed the neighbor property, and I think they've had multiple conversations, and they can safely and adequately reverse. Again, it's not going to change the approval before you today because the access and the entry is going to be the same. An already approved site. All they want to do is cover the second car so they can both have covered parking spaces. And I'm happy to answer any other questions. I just wanted to walk through the history and the current configuration and some of the concerns that the neighbor brought up.
Thank you. All right. Would anyone else like to speak at public comment? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public comment and invite commissioner discussion.
I think given what we're really discussing tonight is specifically changing from a one-car to a two-car covered carport, that all the other issues that have been raised by neighbors are interesting but not relevant, and I think we should find with our planning director and approve the motion as written.
Thank you.
I agree 100% with what Commissioner Sweeney has said.
I agree with what you said. And in addition, I'm really sorry that this gentleman, Mr. Baker, couldn't be here tonight because he seems to be so fully in opposition to this proposal. So but I have no argument with what staff has said and what you have just said. But I think if I would rather be able to hear him here. So I may abstain in my vote. I haven't decided yet. So just want to put that out there.
Okay.
I would like to disclose too that I did meet with the applicant and have walked the property, and it's tight, but they've done a very nice job tucking it in there. I think they did the best they could with the odd-sized lot and what they're dealing with. So,
Yeah, I would especially like, if he doesn't know already, Mr. Baker, to know that there have been experiments with the cars and that nobody has had to go onto his property. I don't know if he knows that. But without knowing that, it's hard for me to, I just wish it could be continued until he were here, until he was able to be here, but I understand you guys have been waiting. So anyway, I'm struggling with that. That's what I'm struggling with.
I also agree with Commissioner Sweeney and Commissioner Kistner on this. I just think that the concerns that Mr. Baker brings up are outside of our jurisdiction. So it's not really something that we can discuss. If we can have a motion.
I move that we determine that the project is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to Section 15301, Class 1, which exempts the construction of small structures, and we accept the required findings and approve the design review exemption to allow the carport to be constructed as proposed.
second.
Commissioner Kistner,
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Abstain.
Chairperson Parker.
Yes. Thank you. If you'd like to leave, you're more than welcome to, or you can stay. It should be a fun one. Moving on to, it's listed as action number 7. It is a consistency determination. If we could have a staff report.
Thank you, Chair Parker. Before you tonight is an administrative determination regarding whether the brewing of beer using a pre-purchased wort and an enclosed fermentation system is consistent with the previously approved bar and restaurant use and is accessory to the primary use as a hotel, bar, and restaurant for the Harvest Inn and Harvest Table at 1 Main Street in the Service Commercial Zoning District. Harvest Inn and Harvest Table recently applied for a Type 75 brewery license. to allow on-site brewing in a manner described above and also with some information provided in your packets. At issue is that breweries' uses are not defined in the zoning code, but are listed as conditional uses in the service commercial zoning district. So, although the applicant proposes a unique process, staff requests that the planning commission, the applicant proposes a unique process and requests that the planning commission find it consistent with their approved use. They propose to, as I mentioned, purchase pre-made wort, which is essentially the process you extract the sugars from the grain. So the boiling, the cooking, and the using of water would be done off-site at an approved brewery, purchased and transferred to their site and put into essentially an enclosed machine that then would ferment the wort into beer. And then they would keg that and store it on site. They're proposing a maximum of 100 barrels of beer and are proposing, like I said, a closed system for brewing. Zoning Code Section 1708030 states that the planning director may make an administrative determination that such uses are similar to those of an approved use category, where such uses are clearly similar and characteristic to the uses listed in the zoning district. So staff met with the applicants, looked at their proposal, and because breweries are listed in the service commercial zoning district, felt that staff could not, at our level, make a determination that their use was consistent with their past approved use permit. However, that zoning code further directs that this determination may be reviewed and confirmed or overturned by the Planning Commission, and in doing so, the Planning Commission shall consider the character of the proposed use, the purposes of the zoning district which the proposed use is proposed, and the general plan. As I mentioned, staff made a determination based on the inclusion of breweries in the conditional uses portion of the service commercial zoning district. However, the applicants have requested Planning Commission review this determination in light of the specific operational characteristics, in hopes of the Commission making a determination that the proposed use is classified as accessory culinary activity consistent with their approved use. And so staff is requesting that the Planning Commission either identify that the methodology that they are proposing, which staff does acknowledge is less impactful than a typical brewing operation, lessens the process and potential impacts to a level consistent with their approved use permit, or concur with staff determination. The applicants are here to make a brief presentation, and they provided some information to you as well regarding how they propose to brew.
I'm going to open up the public comment for the applicant. No, for you to give your presentation.
Thanks. Thank you, Noah. Good evening. My name is Kevin Wozniewski. I am the construction manager for the projects that happen at Harvest Inn. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to present. The owners of Harvest Inn and Harvest Table desire to make up to 101 barrels of beer per year on the property located at 1 Main Street to their customers to consume on their property. We'd like the St. Helena Planning Department Commission to conclude that the production of up to 101 barrels of beer per year is a culinary activity and is consistent accessory use to the existing use permits for the Harvest Inn and Harvest Table. Making equivalent of less than 9 gallons of beer per day at our fine dining restaurant is incidental and clearly subordinate to the permitted hotel and restaurant uses. We put together a couple of key points that I'd like to review that highlight the incidental beer making facility. I believe they're in front of you as well to follow along. I wanted to make it clear that all of the beer that we are going to produce is going to be consumed on site. The beer will be fermented on site and then placed into kegs to be chilled and served only on the property, primarily at the Harvest Table bar, as well as on-site catering and special events. We'd like to determine that we are not a brewery or a brew pub. The production is limited to 101 barrels of beer. This is equal to less than 9 gallons of beer per day. The making of beer is a culinary activity. There will be no bottling or off-site marketing of the hotel and restaurant as a brewery or a brew pub. Nearby definitions of brewery from our research of other zoning state that breweries are businesses that make over 15,000 barrels of beer per year, and we're just looking at 101. The brewery process will not impact our water neutral report. We are water neutral for this beer making process. The beer will be made with wort, as Noah mentioned, off-site, and that's the grain and the water, the grain mixture and water that will be trucked into us. Essentially, we're just going to be storing it into our storage tanks, fermented over time, and then served to our guest. We see this as an incidental and accessory use. We currently serve beer at our property, which our hotel and restaurant guests consume on site. Our hotel staff already make many foods on site for our guests to consume. These include pickles, bread, honey, ice cream, and other items. Making beer would not materially change the behavior of our guests or the employees, nor would it change the use of our property. The building square footage. I know we all think of breweries as these huge Anheuser-Busch or Anchor Steam establishments, but our building square footage is quite small. It's contained inside of an 8-foot by 8-foot space, which is roughly the size of a residential walk-in closet. The equipment required to ferment the beer is rather small and located inside an existing space adjacent to the chef's office and a walk-in refrigerator previously approved by the Napa County Health Department. I've actually included a few plans inside of your packet if you'd like to look at them. It's highlighted in red where the location of this brewery would be, or what we call a brew pod. In the middle of the map, on the very first page, would be our restaurant, the Harvest Table, and all the way to the left is highlighted in red where the brew pod would be located. The very next page is an enlargement of that building. It's our maintenance building right now, and it's also where we do our food storage, and that's where our chef's office is located. And you can see in red where this location would be proposed for the brew pod. The third page is actually an enlargement of the brew pod room. It's the 8-foot by 8-foot room where we'll be holding two 42-inch in diameter tanks, storage tanks, and a glycol machine. It's a glycol machine. It's used to help ferment the process of the beer. It's probably as big as this little table right here. So it's looking at about 2.5 feet tall, 2 feet wide is what the glycol machine would be.
Which number is it?
The glycol machine?
Yeah.
It would be number 6. It's in the bottom right-hand corner.
Oh, there it is. Okay, got it.
And then the two number 3s are the actual tanks, the 42-inch in diameter tanks, and they're roughly about 5.5 feet tall. The last key point I wanted to make is it's a fair application of the code. Our hotel, Harvest Inn, is seeking consistent treatment under the code and of the codes having jurisdiction over competing restaurants or hotels. There are a number of dining restaurants in the city of St. Helena and throughout Napa County where other planning departments have concluded that no use permit is necessary for this kind of small batch beer making for on-site only used in a culinary environment. And that's the very last page of the packet that is in front of you, the 11 by 17, is we went through with all the restaurants, recent restaurants that have that type 75 liquor license, and they also have a small batch brewery process, and so we highlighted them in red dots all throughout here. I believe there's 12 of them, 11 or 12 of them for you to look at. I'd like to conclude that we feel that making limited amounts of beer for on-site consumption in an existing and previously approved hotel and restaurant is a consistent accessory use that does not require the expansion of use requiring approval of a use permit amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for the applicant at this time?
Yes. And this is Kevin Diamond.
Yeah, they're both Kevin.
General manager of the hotel.
You know, if we have any questions, we will ask you at the end. But Kevin, do you have a presentation as well? No. Okay, perfect. All right.
I have a couple of questions. Did you have a question? First of all, how do you get the beer from the tanks to the kegs?
I don't know the specifics of it, but I believe it's a process where you have a hookup, that's to the tank right there, and it's a hose that connects into the actual kegs that are present right
And
there.
you'll be doing that in this room.
Right.
And how many kegs are you going to be storing at a time?
I don't know that exact number right
Or
there. All I know is
what do you-
per year, we'll be making 100 to 101 a year.
But you're not going to have 101.
Not
Okay.
We'll be
'cause, yeah.
spanning them out because we can't keep that much beer on site because it will go bad, I'm sure,
Okay.
after a certain
Okay. So where will the kegs be stored?
In this location as well.
In the same location. Okay. And is this the 8x8 room?
This is an 8x8 room, and it's also adjacent is a food storage location
Okay.
as well.
All right. Thank you.
The pipe that takes it from the tanks into a barrel is a 3-foot sanitary hose which hooks right into the tank, pumps it into the barrel.
If you could speak into the microphone so people at home can hear. Thank you.
The piping system that takes the beer from the tank to the barrel is a 3-foot sanitary hose. It's done very quick and easy.
that's
It's
what it
all done
sounds
by
like.
gravity flow. And then the other answer to your question is there'll be 3 barrels on storage at any one time.
Could you state your name?
Kevin Diamond for the record.
Perfect, thank you. I don't think there are any other questions from the commission at this time, but we can call you back up after everyone else has spoken at public comment. With that said, would anyone else like to speak at public comment? If you could state your name for the record. Sarah Cake Bread.
That's not actually it. I am Sarah Cake Bread, and I'm here speaking on behalf of the Harvest Inn and Harvest Table. And I greatly respect General Manager Kevin Diamond and have admired Charlie Palmer ever since I visited his first restaurant, Oriole, in New York when I was about 27. Since then, Charlie Palmer has achieved great success throughout the country. And I think it will be a win-win for all of us if he can achieve that same success here. But to do so, Harvest Table needs to be able to serve cocktails and spirits. Although I'm not a big spirits drinker myself, whenever I have visited Harvest Table, I'm surprised that such a perfect bar space and fine restaurant does not serve drinks. And I know that has not been lost on friends and colleagues and visitors either, who might choose not to return anytime soon because they want that gin and tonic before dinner. To serve alcohol in a place and age where it is nearly impossible to get a full liquor license, Kevin and his team want to brew small quantities of craft beer on site for a Type 75 license, which would allow them to offer the full bar the restaurant calls for. Although their use permit does not say they can do this, it also doesn't say they can't. So to me, allowing the license makes a lot of sense. They have the capacity, and from what we heard, the part that uses a lot of water and creates most of the waste will be done in Sonoma County, only to be fine-tuned and finished here. For the potential of what a liquor license might bring to the restaurant, it seems like a very low-impact, modest, and logical path. In addition, I'm also here to support the 70 of Harvest Inn's 100 employees who actually live in the greater St. Helena area. And not only because of 70 local jobs, but because that then takes dozens of cars out of the crazy congestion on Highway 29. And from what I understand, all of their employees benefit from year-round employment in a highly seasonal business. And I know that much of their ability to do this will result and rely on the success of Harvest Table. Lastly, I'm here in support of the City of St. Helena's financial well-being. I recently received a notice announcing the formation of a new task force to evaluate potential new revenue sources for the city. I'm sure there are lots of great ideas out there to raise additional revenue for our city, which is financially struggling. But to me, the best idea would be assuring that our city's #1 tax-paying business is as successful as it can be. Of course, it would be great for our economy if everyone drank wine in wine country, but that is not our reality. A pre-dinner cocktail or drink after work in a spacious, comfortable bar or nice restaurant is part of the fabric of many people's lives. So no matter how good the food is or how many local people they employ, not having access to cocktails and other spirits in a place like Harvest Table is a major roadblock to success. So I encourage the commission to do the smart thing for our city. Let the Harvest Inn acquire a Type 75 license and show us all the winning addition to our community that they are meant to be. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to speak at the public hearing?
Matthew Heil, 51 Summit Road, Malvern, Pennsylvania. Not that that matters. Or maybe it does. Weigh it accordingly. I'm here just basically to say that, I think this is kind of a difficult decision in a certain sense. Doing beer as we've seen other beer production of other restaurants has come before the commission as an accessory use and is part of a use permit update or amendment. But this Type 75 license exists for a reason, and I think that it's to facilitate this use that specifically is before you today. I mean, I think staff did a very good job in holding firm to the lines and the letter of the law. And there's an opportunity here for the public to weigh in. It was agendized, it was noticed. And, absent any public outcry or anything like that, I have to agree with Mrs. Cakebread, who so eloquently stated all the very good reasons for why this is before you and why you ought to approve it. Furthermore, I wanted to make one point of clarification, and that has to do with water, right? So even if they used, if they're going to make, 9 gallons of beer per day, times 365 days, although maybe 1 or 2 days a year they'd take a day off. Even if they used 5 gallons of water to rinse out things while they were making their beer, that's 16,000 gallons, 16,425. And their water agreement, if I recall correctly, is something about 6.2 million gallons of water. Last time we checked, it was about 2.4 million gallons of consumption. And since then, they've ripped out a bunch of shrubbery that was sucking up a bunch of water. So they're probably down below 2 million, which leads me to believe that even this 0.0027 increase in water consumption, even if they were to use some water making this, is still well within their water agreement. So it is not a concern. It is infinitesimal when you look at the grand scheme of the water situation in the city. And I just wanted to put that on the record because I think it's important. I think there's perception and then reality. It's literally one drop in the bucket. With regards to the approval, if I was in your shoes, and not that I know what that feels like, but I think you need to look at the bigger picture, take a step back, realize that this is a great way for us to add additional revenue, a great way to help one of our most important businesses succeed. And the fact that they have 70 of their 100 employees living and working in St. Helena is just a testament to how much we should want them to succeed. The city's biggest taxpayer in terms of TOT, in terms of sales tax, and in terms of real estate property tax. So I think given the context, I would vote in favor. But of course I don't have a vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Heil. Good evening, Pam Simpson, St. Helena Chamber of Commerce. I think it's just fun to watch Matthew Heil keep his remarks to 3 minutes, so that was exciting. So it kind of made me lose my train of thought, but I'm thrilled to have Sarah Cakebread speak tonight. I'm thrilled to have Matthew speak tonight because they said all the things that I wanted to say. I think I've talked to several of you often about St. Helena and how this is an opportunity for us to really show the business community that the city is trying to do be business friendly. And this is a perfect example of that. We need in this town revenue. We need in this town a planning commission, a city staff, and a city council that's going to be respectful to the business community, to those people who are generating the revenue. And you've got a perfect opportunity tonight. It's been repeated. They're the top employer in this town. They are the top sales tax producer. They're the top TOT payer and one of the top property taxpayers. They need this. This is important for their business. And there's no public outcry not to do it. And they have been a great community supporter from the get-go. So we would strongly encourage you to give them the permit and let them do this tonight. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Simpson. Would anyone else like to speak at the public hearing? Seeing none, I'm going to invite the applicant to come back up if you so feel the need. If not, I will close the public hearing and invite commission discussion. Do we have any questions of staff before we start the discussion? I didn't offer that before the presentation, so. No? All right.
Just to clarify what Bobby asked before, a tie vote falls to the negative, which in this case would sustain the director's decision to consider this not a permitted use? I just want to
That's correct.
I have one other question for staff. If we do not approve this, or if we do not find that this is consistent use of their permit, the alternatives, as I understand them to be, would be to require them to go back and go through a process for a modified use. What is the earliest you could complete that process and get this back to our table?
Generally, within probably 30 days from today.
That's something we could commit to?
I'm making that commitment today, yes.
Who would like to go first?
Grace, I can tell.
Getting after me. I certainly appreciate the Harvest Inn, and I appreciate all the things that have been said. I appreciate the fact of what they do with the TOT. I also would appreciate that we start following our rules, and I would like to uphold staff on this and ask them to get an amendment on their use permit. That's
And to do what?
get an amendment use permit.
Thank you.
I agree with all those other things, but I don't think they're relevant to any kind of decision that we make. I think that whether a business is well thought of or not is what we're here to do, is see the process is honored, as Grace just said. However, I do think that this, especially with that list of other restaurants that have on-site beer making, I do think that this classifies as an accessory, and that I don't think there needs to be any other modification to the permit. They make bread. They're not a bakery. They probably don't have, whatever you have to go through to be a bakery. They make pickles. They probably don't have to do that. Restaurants that make make their own sausage, I don't think they have to, go ahead and become a sausage maker. So I think we should approve what they have asked for. In addition to the fact that there are all those other things, but just going by the letter of our ordinance, I think very well fits into the accessory category. So I would totally approve this. I think it's a great idea, and think they're great people.
I would like to concur with Bobby that I think it's well within their culinary use. I think that for a lot of reasons it goes part and parcel with what Charlie Palmer's accomplished in many of his locations, and it's just one more asset to the overall offering. So I believe very strongly in that from that point of view. But I also want to speak to what Grace is saying, and I disagree that although I absolutely respect process and I respect rules, I think one of the things that the Planning Commission is here to do is to apply intelligence and apply specific facts in each case, and not just rely strictly on trying to be create a bureaucracy that's not necessary. We have a situation in our city where we're short-staffed. It takes time to get things done. I love that Noah can commit to 30 days, but that's probably really pushing it up against the wall, and that means other things are going to get shifted aside, which is not fair to those applicants. To create bureaucracy just to dot some I's and say we followed rules, to what end? To come back here in a month and have the same conversation and approve it? We've now put the applicant through more cost. We put the city through more cost. And I think that sends a really loud message to business that we're not easy to do business with, that we don't think about a particular case and look at the values and the facts at hand at that moment in time. And I want to make decisions for the right reasons. I don't want to make them for bureaucratic reasons. And I think if we push this down the road, we're simply doing it to make a point, and I don't think it's the point I would want to make.
I also want to ask and say that as long as the conditions that are there, like they couldn't start producing more, no bottling, and I'm assuming that all that language is in place. So that feels very comfortable then, if it is. Yeah.
That's correct. If the determination is made that they are culinary use consistent with their approved use permit, it will be based on the specifics of the applicant's proposal.
Thank you. I am in agreement with Commissioner Kistner on this. I do believe that to find this as consistent with the culinary use is somewhat of a knee-jerk reaction, and I don't think it sends a message that that St. Helena is not pro-business. I think it sends a message that we need to start following the rules. The city has gotten in trouble by not following the rules in the past and following procedures, and I think that unfortunately, this application could have been in front of us several months ago, or when the initial use permit was there, and it wasn't. And I also wanted to point out that Golden Harvest came to us to get a brewery permit. They amended their use permit. I think that's really important to say, and very recently they did. So I'm in favor of an amended use permit at an exponentially fast speed. So NOAA is committed to 30 days, and that is what I'm in favor of.
It sounds like we're going to be split tonight, and we are missing a important additional vote with Mary Koverstein absent. I would like to throw out to the committee that we continue this discussion so that we can have a full vote of our commission.
I like that idea.
To a determined date, being October 6th would be our next planning
Yeah, at our next meeting.
I would like to possibly throw out that maybe the applicant doesn't want to wait for that, because if Mary comes back and decides to vote for it to be a use permit, then that puts them back even further. And if this is time is of the essence.
So to address that, because staff is trying to be as accommodating as possible to the applicants, I actually recommended that they file their use permit amendment at the same time they filed their consistency determination, and they agreed to do that. So that's why I was able to commit to the 30 days. They've already filed the use permit amendment application, which is in process. So even if you continue it for 2 weeks and the decision stays based on Commissioner Culberstein's vote, I would still, or staff would still be able to bring the use permit amendment back within the 30-day time frame to allow review by the commission. My commitment was to parallel track the process to try to be as efficient as possible.
I think just the possibility that we might shave 2 weeks off the applicant's time wait, I think we should continue it. I would support that.
We could invite the applicant up to
I
weigh in on that.
I would like to have the applicants weigh in on how you would like to hedge your bets, for lack of a better phrase.
Yes, we would like it continued to October 6th.
Okay. So do we have a motion to continue this to the October 6th meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney?
Yes.
Commissioner Kistner?
No.
Chairperson Parker?
No.
So what does that mean? So does that mean that even though the applicant wants to continue and we're not going to continue? Is that what you voted to do?
Is there any way the applicant can get on the agenda for our next meeting in spite of the fact that we weren't able to continue it here?
We've really just underscored what we don't want to do. We just voted against business.
Typically, if the applicant requests a continuance, it's granted separate from a vote. It's not needed.
Okay.
The goal was to vote to a date certain, but we could continue the item to a date certain, separate from that vote. That no vote was required to continue it.
All right.
And that continues to October 6th.
So, okay.
All right. We will see you on October 6th. Moving on to item 8, it's a demolition permit, design review and variance for 679 Dowdell Lane.
Thank you, Chairperson Parker. Wait a second. Okay. The existing 1 acre parcel on Dowdell Lane is currently developed with a 1,680 square foot single family residence, 480 square foot detached garage, and new 560 square foot 1-story, 1-room second unit that was approved in 2014. An aerial view of the property is on the screen at this time. The applicant is seeking a demolition permit in order to remove the existing single family residence and detached garage. Design review approval is requested to construct a new 1,944 square foot 1-story single family residence with a 288 square foot covered breezeway and 580 square foot detached garage on the property. The proposed new single-story home would have a maximum height of 19 feet 7 inches, while the detached garage is being proposed at 17 feet 5 inches. Like the newly constructed second unit, the exterior will be finished with stucco siding and a corrugated metal roof. The applicant has also proposed a 6-foot-tall block wall with a plaster coat in the front elevation of the home that will essentially connect the existing second unit with the new detached garage, creating privacy for the homeowner. A variance is required because the home, as designed, is wider than allowed by code. The garage is taller than permitted by code, and a 6-foot wall is not permitted in the front elevation of a home by one section of the code. Staff does feel that this is a unique property due to its size, zoning, and location. The parcel is 1 acre in size, zoned for agricultural uses, and is surrounded by vineyards on 3 sides. The only side that isn't vineyard is another 1 acre rural residence. Furthermore, the property is outside the urban limit line and is on Dowdell Lane, which is largely unpaved and dead ends into private property. There are no properties near the proposed project site that would be in any way negatively affected by the development of the project at this location. For these reasons, staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the project. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Do we have any questions of staff at this time?
Do you know if Ms. Stanton was, or the neighbor was contacted?
And all neighbors within 300 feet were notified, and it was publicly noticed as well in the paper.
But I'll have to ask the applicant, I guess, if there was any direct.
Yeah, that I do not know.
Okay, you don't know that. I have another question. At one point it says that they need a variance to get the roof higher because it needs to meet the height of the second unit that's already there.
Correct.
Was there a variance for that height?
No.
No.
Second units have to meet the same development standards as the main structure of the home. Accessory structures have different development standards in second units.
Okay, so that wasn't a variance.
It was not.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. If there are no other questions, I'd like to open up the public hearing. Is the applicant here?
Hi there, I'm Chris Garwood, 679 Dowdell Lane. I was in front of you, I think about a year ago, for the guest house. And the idea was to build the guest house first, move into the guest house, and then build the main house. The guest house was finished just last week, and so we're coming in front of you with the idea of obtaining a permit to build the new structure. Thank you, Noah, and for the staff report, Aaron. I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Perfect. Do you have any questions for the applicant at this time? Bobby, you asked about the neighbor?
I was by there. Yeah. Oh, yes. Did you reach out to Barbara at all?
No, I didn't talk to any neighbors specifically.
Oh, okay.
But as Aaron says, they were all notified.
Yeah.
No one's called me, or Charlie hasn't called me. No one's called me.
I only had one question. Is it regards to the two different versions?
Is your microphone on?
Oh, sorry. No, it's not. I'll repeat that. I just have one question in regards to the two different renderings. You have one where you have the roof separated, one where it's connected. Is that, it sounds to me from all the application, you want the roof connected. Is this just to give us an alternative to consider?
Exactly. I wanted to, the idea was the architect wanted to have the roof connected, and to be honest, when I first came in front of the former planning director over a year ago, I showed him everything. I said, here's the master plan. What do you think? He said, well, your house is wider than it needs to be, but because you have a big opening in the middle, you can see through it, it's fine with me. So Aaron asked me to show an example, if you did cut the roof off, what it would look like.
Oh.
And that was the purpose of doing that picture.
Okay. But if all things being equal, you want, sorry.
This is what I'd like to see, the
right.
picture you see in front of you, please.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I've got one more. Would you consider making that wood-burning fireplace a gas fireplace?
My preference is for wood burning.
I guess, are you not in the city limits? Or?
I am in city limits, yes.
I was
thought all
under the
new
impression that city
construction
limits
has
has to be gas.
Yeah.
They'll be subject to the air board requirements, but some manufacturers of wood-burning fireplaces can meet those requirements.
Okay.
Boy, if you could talk yourself out of putting more particulate matter into the air in the winter, that would be terrific.
Thank you.
Any other
Actually, I'm
questions?
sorry, you asked about Barbara. She did actually call me 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
I didn't speak to her. She left a message, and she said she wishes I could preserve the existing house. That was her comment. She thought it was a lovely house that's there right now.
I went by there today. I thought so too. But
All right, well, perfect. Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to speak at the public hearing on this agenda item? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and invite commissioner discussion.
Okay, I'd like to clarify, is the variance, one of the variances is for the house because it's wider than it would ordinarily be?
Not than that it ordinarily be. There's
Okay.
a 60% lot width maximum, and if you consider the building as it is with the entire roof, that comes out to 66%. However, if you cut the breezeway off and don't roof it there, it would be under that maximum. So it's kind of debatable. It's up for interpretation, and that's for you guys to decide.
Which is why we have the alternative view. But
It wouldn't need a variance if it didn't have the full roof.
Right.
yeah, the second plan doesn't need a variance.
No.
Okay, but
That's not what he wants to build. He wants to build this.
But that is sort of is that considered the hardship is considered peculiar to the property because it's 1 acre instead of 2.
Right.
But it is 1 acre instead of 2. Okay. All right. I'd like to hear what some other people have to say. I'm still thinking.
Again, my point of view is that we shouldn't make it harder than it needs to be. We could have him slice the roof out in the middle, and he wouldn't even be here talking with us. But this is what he wants to build. There's not any opposition to what he's building. It's really just an opportunity to get in out of the rain and walk through. And I don't see that we should say no. The staff seems to like it, and I think we should help him out.
I agree with that. I just also feel that when whoever made the ordinance that it should be different from 1 acre, that they had some reason for it. I don't know if anyone knows what that is. And if nobody knows and nobody cares, then I'm wondering, can the ordinance be changed to reflect what's actually going on rather than have this disconnect, which I think undermines the process of what we do here. But that's, that I feel uncomfortable, going ahead and doing it, even though it's logical and it makes sense.
Well, and this is a unique situation. This isn't a structure. This isn't a solid structure. He's really covered a breezeway. I'm sorry, I'm not good at the microphone with all the papers.
It's true.
But, so I think we have to be open-minded to the facts at hand in this case. If this is not one long continuous structure, he's connecting two structures with the roof. And so therefore, he's kind of put himself into a unique situation that if you measure, from an absolute standpoint, yes, it's too wide, but I believe that my interpretation of this ordinance, it was written for single structures that if you were to have built a completely enclosed structure, then we'd have a whole different conversation. But in the facts of this proposal, this is not one long continuous structure. He's sort of done that by putting the roof on it, but it doesn't change what it really is.
I agree with you. I don't disagree with you. But I think there's reference in here, too, to another piece, another 1 acre piece where there's been a similar thing. Wasn't there reference in here? And so that's what I'm wondering. If these 1 acre pieces are getting variances, why are we
Bobby, I don't think that's an appropriate discussion. I don't think we're
For now,
discussing
okay.
the ordinance. If we wanted to do that, I think we need to put it on a future agenda.
Well, I'm just kind of...
Thank you, Commissioner Kitchener. That is correct.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
yeah. All right.
that-
Well, this is my struggle. So I agree with what you're saying. Also, the 6-foot fence. All around town, there are fences that are higher than 6 feet. I guess, but so he's asking for a variance for the 6-foot fence in front too.
So the 6-foot fence is also open to, so there's 2 code sections. There's one that regulates fences and walls, and that only applies to fences and walls within the urban limit line. He is outside the urban limit line, so that would not apply to him.
Oh, okay.
For some reason, in the accessory structure part of the code, it also mentions fence height, and typically we would rely on the more specific code section that says, it applies within the urban limit line. He's outside of it, but because it's in the code, even though it may be a mistake, we would still need a variance for it. So
Okay. Well, thank you. I just really want to be able to approach it in a way that makes sense. So I appreciate that.
Commissioner Kistner, do you have something?
I like the project a lot. I think the second drawing that you put in there showing that split roof just makes you really want to approve what he's wanting to build. I think it's lovely. One of the things that's disturbing to me, and I say this every meeting, I'd like to see a color palette I'd like to see what the roof material looks like. I'm not going to stop this project tonight, but I think we really got to start telling the applicants that we want these things, because I'd really like to know what this looks like, not just stick drawings. I do like the project a lot, by the way.
Thank you, Commissioner Kistner. Commissioner Sweeney, do you have any further comments to add? Commissioner Monette?
I like the project a lot, too.
All right, I do too, and I do appreciate, these renderings and drawings are a vast improvement over what we saw for the accessory dwelling unit, so thank you for that. But I also am going to echo Commissioner Kistner's statements of it would be nice to see what it is going to look like. And I also do agree with Commissioner Sweeney on it's not a solid building, so it doesn't really feel like it meets that 60% threshold. So if we could have a motion, that would be fantastic.
I move that the project is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to Section 15301, which exempts the demolition of a single-family house and accessory structures, and Section 15303, which exempts the construction or conversion of small structures, including single-family residence, garages, pools, etc. We accept the required findings and approve a demolition permit, design review, and variance for the proposed demolition and new construction at 679 Dowdell Lane.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Commissioner Kistner,
Yes.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Yes.
Chairperson Parker.
Yes. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 9, it's a demolition permit, use permit, variance, and design review for 1340 Tanger Street and 1255 Oak Street. Can we get an updated staff report on this continued item?
Thank you, Chair Parker. As you mentioned, the project before you tonight is a request by the St. Helena Catholic Church for demolition, use permit, and design review, as well as a variance approval to demolish the existing Parish Life Center and second time around thrift store, construct a new Parish Life Center on the church property at 1340 Tainer Street, relocate the second time around thrift store to an existing residential building at 1255 Oak Avenue. And both properties are in the public and quasi-public zoning district, and a variance is requested due to shortage of parking. 120 spaces is required based on a strict interpretation of the code, and 104 spaces have been provided. The primary project site, as I mentioned, is currently developed with the existing Parish Life Center and second time around thrift store, the Rectory building, and the historic Catholic Church, which was built in 1890 and is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The Rectory building is also constructed in the 1890s and is listed on the City of St. Helena Historic Resource Register. The adjacent project site, 1255 Oak Avenue, is home to the Catholic Elementary School, a large parking lot, smaller parking lot, access from Spring Street, and a residential structure in the craftsman architectural style, which is proposed for the second time around thrift store location. The project proposes to demolish the existing two-story Parish Life Center and construct a new two-story Parish Life Center in the similar location. The net area of proposed assembly uses with the proposed new structure and meeting rooms totals approximately 4,350 square feet. The existing building, or the proposed building, I'm sorry, will have a maximum height of 35 feet. The general plan designation, as mentioned, is the public and quasi-public designation. This is typical of schools, churches, etc. Several of the most applicable general plan policies are identified in the staff report, and staff finds that the project is consistent with those policies. Similarly, the site is zoned public and quasi-public, which implements that general plan designation. The zoning district identifies that the Planning Commission may grant most of the development criteria through the use permit process, so it leaves some flexibility in the development standards. As identified in the staff report, staff finds that the proposed project is consistent with the zoning criteria, with the exception of the amount of parking. The project came before the Commission on August 18th of this year. The Planning Commission reviewed the proposed project at a public hearing, and at the hearing, the staff gave a staff report, applicant presented, and numerous public comments were received. The Commission directed the applicant to further address potential impacts from the thrift store donation, drop-off, and parking location, address some of the signage on the school property, consider and address potential impacts of full occupancy of both the church and the Parish Life Center building at the same time, and expand the proposed parking around the Parish Life Center structure to address the identified parking deficiency. In response, the applicants have redesigned the parking lot. I'm sorry, there's some elevations and graphics of the structure in color, that's correct. And I just wanted to identify, this is an aerial photograph of the area with the Parish Life Center structure identified there and the Second Time Around thrift store identified there. This was a previous site plan that was seen by the Planning Commission. It proposed 5 parking spaces, 2 in front of the Parish Life Center and 3 in a carport around the side, which is on the left side of the screen. This is the revised site plan, but also zoomed out to show the adjacent parcel. And those areas in yellow are the areas that were modified to expand the amount of parking. So the proposed site plan now includes 9 parking spaces adjacent to the Parish Life Center itself, and several additional parking spaces at the corner of Oak and Tainer. That's one of the locations to the school parking lot, which is currently fenced. That fence is close to the sidewalk. The project actually proposes to pull that fence back to the left-turn boundary of the yellow highlight there and restripe to provide additional parking spaces in an effort to respond to the commission direction. So as mentioned, the applicants redesigned the parking lot adjacent to both the Parish Life Center and the Catholic school. The donation area was modified to create a designated collection area. Signs have been modified and removed as appropriate, and the applicants have indicated that the Parish Life Center church building will not be fully occupied simultaneously with the Parish Life Center. This was memorialized in Condition 9 of the proposed resolution to approve the project, and also there's another condition, number 10, which requires that the applicants utilize off-site parking and shuttle services when events are anticipated to exceed available parking, and that was proposed by the applicants, and staff have just memorialized that in a condition.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's a significant amount of analysis in the staff report. As mentioned, there was 2 historic structures on the site, so staff requested a historic resource report be done on the Parish Life Center, which is a building that was constructed around the turn of the century. However, it's been modified significantly and no longer has significance under CEQA. There was a water use analysis report, which identifies that the project will meet the water neutral requirements. Significant analysis regarding design review and use permit requirements. And then the variance. So the applicants had filed the variance just prior to the Planning Commission's last review. So in response to that, the Planning Commission continued the item for staff to do some additional analysis of the variance application, in addition to allow the applicants to make the modifications that have been mentioned. The analysis of the variance requirements and findings are included in the staff report, and staff does find that the findings can be made. A significant amount of correspondence has come in on the project. I'm sure some folks here are wanting to make comments on it. A vast majority of those comments are in support of the project. Regarding issues remaining, it's essentially parking is the only identified issue. As mentioned, a very strict analysis of all of the uses, so the school, the church, and the Parish Life Center would require 120 parking spaces. The applicants have revised and constructed additional parking spaces to propose 104. Staff finds that is adequate, and the applicants have filed the variance to support the commission's support of that and staff's recommendation. So given that, staff wanted to identify the previous plan for parking and the walkways. There was a inadvertently identified parking which was requested to not be counted, as you'll remember. The proposed site plan now identifies all of the parking which serves the site. There was also a question as to the parking on Spring Street, whether that was within the 300-foot requirement of the zoning code. It is within 300 feet of the Parish Life Center, so that does qualify. Staff's identified the proposed pedestrian pathways from the parking to all the uses. They're in yellow. Given this, staff is recommending approval and is available for any questions should the commission have any.
Do we have any questions of staff at this time?
Does the number that we have, does that include the Spring Street? When you said
That does include.
Okay, thanks.
The applicants are here for a presentation.
All right, perfect. I'd like to open up the public hearing and invite the applicants to come. I'm actually going to interrupt you really quickly. Apparently, the city attorneys have advised us that we need to give a disclosure at this time, that even though I'll let Grace, she's a parishioner.
I'd like to disclose that I'm a parishioner of this church, and that I believe that I can judge this fairly.
I too am a parishioner, but I also believe I can judge fairly.
I guess I am considered to be a parishioner, so I can judge this fairly.
And
But if you talk to my father, he would disagree with that.
I am not a parishioner, but I did meet with Father Gordon, and I still think I can be objective, even though he's quite charming and persuasive.
Furthermore, I did speak with Furthermore, I did also meet with the applicant, or I didn't meet with him, I spoke with him on the phone.
I met with the applicant and walked through the plans with him and walked the property.
I also met with him.
All right, now that all those disclosures are out.
Anything else you'd like to know?
You're fine.
So, Richard Sambucetti with Borges Architectural Group, but I'm thinking that the father may want to get up here and talk since he's so convincing. That said, I would like to go briefly through the variance. I think we have. I want to thank the commission for the opportunity to come back. Noah, thank you for your assistance. We have worked with staff and been able to, I think, resolve the issues and present the variance in a manner that will that staff concurs with, and I believe we have a solid argument for the variance and can justify the variance as well. There are 3 points that I want to touch on. We have adequate parking for the uses that we have on site now. Historically, the church has been able to accommodate its parking over the years of its existence, and with the new PLC, it's really not changing. So we feel that we have adequate parking as it is, and in particular with the parking that we've been able to add. The St. Helena ordinance doesn't really have a mechanism for addressing mixed uses and a campus-like situation that is unique to a church school situation like this. We also have, as was mentioned, the historical registration of both the church and the rectory give us limitations on what we can do on the site. We're restricted to what we can do there. So our basis is that the ordinance we should be able to address parking on the need, not on general regulation when it doesn't apply. We're not seeking a reduction in parking necessarily. Instead, we're looking at we're trying to demonstrate that we have enough parking to meet the need of all the activities that are happening on the church. The zoning ordinance, to reiterate, doesn't give us an opportunity to look at mixed uses, what's happening when similar activities that don't necessarily add up as one. The cumulative total isn't the same because of the timing and the use and the difference in uses. We've done the analysis. You have before you a rather detailed analysis of different scenarios that happen during various times of the week for the church. I'm not going to go into a lot of that detail. I can answer questions for you if you have them. I'm going to assume that you've had a chance to look at that and been able to make some sense of it. But we have a number of different scenarios that pretty much cover the kinds of activities and the things that are going to happen during any given week. And I think you'll see at the bottom of that, we have demonstrated that under any scenario, we have a surplus of parking given whatever uses might be occurring simultaneously or not on the variance request. We have to justify it on, there are 5 points. Does a hardship exist on this property. Yes, it does with the historical restrictions of the church and the rectory. That does qualify. It limits us to what we can do. That is a hardship. Is it necessary? Is it necessary to preserve for the preservation and enjoyment of the property rights? And I think it's clear that the church, in providing for the life of the church, gathering hospitality, that's what the church does. And in order to fulfill their mission, they need to have the opportunity to do all these things. So we do meet that criteria. Will the variance create any ill effects? We're not changing essentially what the church has been doing for a number of years. So we are not creating any ill effects. Is a condition, is there uniqueness? Well, yes, the situation with multiple uses, different times of day, that's not addressed in the zoning ordinance, and we in fact do have a number of activities and circumstances that happen, and they don't happen at the same time, can't happen at the same time, and they involve the same people. So they all can't be in all the different places at the same time. So it is a unique situation. And is it a nuisance? You know, is it detrimental to the community? To the contrary, it's actually a positive. It's going to be open not only to the parishioners, but it's a structure that's going to be available to the private use, and it will be a benefit to the community. So I think on all 5 counts, we meet the criteria for allowing you to grant this variance. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Do you have any questions of the applicant?
Yeah, I have a question. If you had included funerals as a scenario, where do you think it would fall? I mean, do you think, which one would it look like, or do you have a sense of that?
It would probably fall in it would be during a weekday, most likely.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I'm assuming it wouldn't go over any of these, so.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Perfect, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I would like to continue to keep the public hearing open and invite anyone else to come up to speak. Please state your name for the record. Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and invite commissioner discussion. Which parishioner or non-parishioner would like to go first?
I'll be a parishioner that goes first. Particularly, I would like to compliment the architect and Father Gordon on coming up with solutions to the questions that we asked last week, or 2 weeks ago. I think that's fabulous. I think the parking situation is pretty well solved, and if Bobby asked a question about funerals, and in the resolution, number 10 says if parking demand is identified as exceeding capacity for a planned event, the operators are required to secure off-site parking and utilize shuttles to service these off-site locations. And if that's enforced, I certainly think there should be no problem with that. I think that the questions that we had were addressed in number 9 and number 10. The questions we had about the, what do you call it, twice? Second time around, thank you. I think 23 and 25
And 24.
and 24 addresses that. I would think that we want to be sure that our Public Works Director here does do the final acceptance on number 29. Other than that, I certainly support the project. I think it's a great project.
I concur with everything Grace said, and walk the property. The Spring Street lot is very easy and accessible, and I like that you're putting in a pathway to make it more usable. There's even a sidewalk cut in that could be accessed by just fixing the gate, so it's a beautiful place.
I was wondering if the X'd out place, was that the Shirts parking lot?
Yes.
Yes, it was. Okay, good. I was glad to see that. So, yeah, I totally support this. I do want to acknowledge people who are suffering the grief of loss. There was one letter who was very sad about losing a building. But so many people are supporting this. It seems like a great project, and I appreciated the size of the graph for my senior eyes. Look at this is amazing. You really you came back with a vengeance, one might say. So I think I agree with what the other commissioners said. I think it's a great project, and I think the parking situation has been taken care of, and that seemed to be the kind of what was the last thing to do anyway. So
I would
support this.
I would also like to thank them for the lovely package they gave us. I think that this is what I'm looking for when I keep saying it every planning commission
We're
that we
looking
need
for
this
a
kind of thing.
doorstop.
I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
I'm also in agreement with the fellow commissioners. I think it's a beautiful project. I'm very happy to see the 100% good faith effort on fixing the parking situation. I do feel that if you had known about the shirt situation prior, we would not have had to continue this in the first place. So I just would like to have a motion.
See, I move that we approve that we determine that the project is exempt from the requirements of CEQA pursuant to Section 15332, Class 32, which exempts the infill development, which is consistent with the general plan and zoning districts, and accept the required findings and approve the demolition design review, variance, and use permit for the proposed demolition and reconstruction of the Catholic Parish Life Center located at 1340 Tainter Street, and accept the required findings and approve the design review and use permit for the second time around thrift store to move to 1255 Oak Avenue.
Second.
Commissioner Monette,
Yes.
Commissioner Kistner,
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney,
Yes.
Chairperson Parker.
Yes. Thank you very much.
I just want to thank NOAA and all of the departments for your cooperation and great help during this, as well as the commissioners. You did a lot of due diligence, and it was very, very helpful for us. You opened our eyes to things we hadn't noticed or seen, and I think that it's also helped us to work with our neighbor who had his reasons, and I think we're hopeful to move forward. And we know that this will be a part of the pride of St. Helena when we're finished, and we're going to have lots of pickaxes when we start the demolition, so you'll be invited to take a swing, okay? Thank you so much.
And I guess we'll just call that an accessory public hearing because off the record. All right. No, we're not going to call it that, Bobby, because that would then mean that we might be biased. So moving on, to item number 10. Give it a few seconds for people to leave the room. All right. Item 10 is a demolition permit, design review, and variance for 1220 Edwards Street. Can we have a staff report, please?
Chair Parker, as mentioned, the item before you tonight is demolition design review and variance, requesting approval to allow the demolition of an existing 400 square foot second unit in an attached garage located within the setback and across property lines. Reconstruction of a new second unit in attached garage within the side and rear yard setbacks, which is what's triggering the variance, and construction of an approximately 26 square foot addition and roofline modification to the rear of the existing historic house at 1220 Edwards in the medium density residential zoning district. And this project is also located in the Charter Oak Historic District. Site plan is up as a PDF and just similar to what you have in your packet that shows the existing and proposed site plan. The site's generally flat. It's about 7,500 square feet. Residential parcel with an existing single-family home, which was originally constructed in the late 1800s, but has been modified several times since. The site's also developed with a detached 350 square foot guest house and two-car garage, which is attached to this structure. And as I mentioned, this structure is built across the eastern property line, so it continues on to the parcel to the east. project proposes to make minor modifications to the primary residence, including replacement of windows, installation of some new doors, modification of the roof line at the rear. And then, as mentioned, demolish the existing garage and second unit in favor of constructing new features with a new design and orientation. The general plan designation of the parcel is medium-density residential. Some of the applicable policies are listed in the staff report. Staff finds the project is consistent with the general plan. The site's also zoned medium-density residential. Second dwelling units are permitted land use in this district. However, the proposed location of the second unit is within the side yard setback, and so a variance is required. The applicant has provided some color renderings to show the design as it fits into the rear of the property line, primarily focusing on the new construction, as there's minimal modifications proposed to the existing historic house. That parcel or that home is also listed on the St. Helena Historic Register, and so a historic resource analysis was conducted, which found that the modifications are minor. So staff finds that the project is qualified for a Class 31 categorical exemption and a Class 1 and Class 3. The water analysis identifies that the project will be water neutral, given that it's primarily replacement of existing fixtures. Staff finds that all of the findings required can be met for both modification of the historic structure, demolition, design review, and variance. The only issue identified was the structure being built across the property line, and a letter was secured from that adjacent property owner indicating that they're supportive of the demolition. So given that, staff is recommending approval of the project and is available for any questions. The applicant's also here, Mr. Dean, if you have any questions for him.
Do we have any questions for staff at this time? Perfect. I'd like to open up the public hearing and invite the applicant up.
Thank you, commissioners, for seeing me, and thank you, staff, for everything that you guys have provided to this point. It's been great. I did just want to point out that the property has the irregular shaped lot, which makes it really difficult to conform to the proper codes today. We did look at options of doing that, which would actually make it a two-story structure with a garage underneath, blocking the views and actually making it more of a nuisance on the neighbors and the neighbors behind us. The neighbors behind us that you could look at as potentially being affected the most are actually set 10 foot down from where the property is now, so they wouldn't be affected at all by it. In fact, the structure that's there now would be pushed further away from the fence than what they currently are seeing. So right now it's pretty much against the property line, and now we would move it 10 feet away from the property line, giving us the proper space to build a two-car garage and a very small, I call it a mother-in-law's unit, which is no kitchen, just a bathroom and room for a bed. We're actually lowering the water because right now it's currently 4 bedrooms on the house, and we're actually lowering that to 3 full bedrooms and rooms on the house. And we're actually taking out a kitchen because there is a kitchen currently. What else did I have? I think that's it. Oh, the historical house that sits on the property now is actually further back than the setback. So let's say if it was a new piece of property that we were going to build a new structure on, we'd be able to build it closer to the street actually and gain more property line, and then maybe we could conform a little bit. But actually with the 50-foot width, it's really hard, and the fact that it's angled at a 50-foot width makes it even more difficult. And I have spoken to the neighbors, and the neighbors are all in very much support of removing what's there, and I've showed them all the color plans and what we put together, and everyone seems to be very positive.
Perfect, thank you. Does anyone have any questions of the applicant?
Just could you state your name?
Oh, Carl Dean, property owner at 1220 Edwards.
Perfect, thank you so much.
Cool.
Would anyone else like to speak at the public hearing? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and invite commissioner discussion.
I first want to disclose that I did meet with the property owner at the property and the builder, so I wanted to disclose that. And
I drove past the site.
I guess I'll go first. I think that I think this is a great project. I think that every variance finding has been met, and that both the builder and the owner have been sensitive to the neighbors. They've been sensitive with respect to the historical aspects of the property. They're creative and inventive in making particularly taking the asphalt away and it's going to be permeable. So they're very sensitive to those ecological issues too, the water and so forth. I think it's a great project. It's going to very much improve Edwards at that location, and I am in total support.
Thank you.
I was unable to get a hold of you. I'm sorry. I did come by. I particularly, he's taking it down. I particularly like the way you've reconstructed that garage. I think that's going to be really neat. I think that's a real creative way of getting a garage, even if you have to tandem park. I'm in full support of the project. I think you've done a real good job.
I echo everything that the other commissioners have said before me. I also met with the applicant and went to the property, and I think it's going to be a great addition.
I echo my fellow commissioners, and I just appreciate the color renderings. I know that Grace probably does as well. I also really appreciate the car. You know, I like the Panamera, so it's gonna, we know what kind of person's going to live there. So I approve the Porsche Panamera. So if we could, I just really, it is a difficult lot with the weird angle, and you also still want to be, perpendicular with the street. So, and also with the old house, I just think it's a nice use of space. I also just want to echo Bobby's. It's really nice to see a permeable space. It's whenever we see asphalt, it just kind of makes me cringe a little bit. So I just really appreciate that effort. And if we could have a motion.
I move that the project is exempt from the requirements of CEQA under Class 1, Class 3, and Class 31 categorically exemptions, accept the required findings, and approve the demolition, design review, and variance to allow the demolition of existing 400 square foot second unit and attached garage located within the setback and access property lines, construction of a new second unit and attached garage within the side and rear yard setbacks, and construction of an approximately 26-foot addition and roofline modification to the rear of the existing historic house at 1220 Edwards.
Second.
Commissioner Kistner?
Yes.
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
Commissioner Sweeney?
Yes.
Chairperson Parker?
Yes. Thank you so much. Moving on. Moving on to item 11, this is an action item. It's a recommendation to adopt the Municipal Code Section 15.26. Can we have a staff report, please?
Sure, this will be quite brief. In 2004, the state passed a new law, Assembly Bill 2188, the Expedited Solar Permitting Act, that modifies the existing Solar Rights Act and requires each city or county to adopt an ordinance that creates an expedited, streamlined residential solar permitting ordinance by September 30th, 2015. Because of this, staff recommends that the Planning Commission should recommend that the City Council adopt a new municipal code section, 15.26, an expedited permit process for small residential rooftop solar systems in order to comply with the state mandated requirements of AB 2188.
Do we have any questions of our staff at this time?
I do not.
Nor do I. Going to open up the public hearing on this item. Going to close the public hearing on this item and invite commission discussion.
What's not to like?
It's a kind of just a necessary thing to do right now. So can we get a motion?
Or do we motion or recommend, or is it the same?
Can we get a motion to recommend?
That's correct.
So moved. I recommend. I move to recommend the motion as it is.
Second. Oh, go ahead, Chris.
Commissioner Sweeney?
Yes.
Commissioner Monette?
Yes.
Commissioner Kistner?
Yes.
Chairperson Parker?
Yes. Moving on to our special report, we have a report from Mary Stevenson from our town, St. Helena, regarding the building of affordable housing in conjunction with hotel development. Thank you for coming tonight. We really do appreciate it.
Mary Stevenson, representing our town, St. Helena. And I want to thank you for allowing us to come and make this presentation tonight. I know you had a very full agenda, and tacking us on to the end of it is probably y'all want to go home and have dinner. But we are anxious to start a public discussion about housing and affordable housing in St. Helena, and this is our opportunity to start that public discussion. So who's got the clicker? So we have compiled some information on the current housing situation in St. Helena, And just in the last 2 weeks or so, we have compiled some information about hotel development in Napa County. There's 2 separate documents. I think you received them both. I'm going to go through the presentation, and then there's some backup information that you can look at your convenience. Our town, St. Helena, has divided the housing needs into 3 groups, and we use a tree as the example. Roots are the people that are underground that you don't see too much. They're cleaning toilets and picking grapes. They're they're here full time. They're not migrant workers, and they're usually living in low-cost rentals here in town, or they're commuting long distances. Trunks are the skilled workforce. These are people who, it's a very diverse group of people in town. Most of them are commuting long distances so they can own a home someplace else, and others are renting here locally. And branches are the people who are making $100,000 or more. They're professional workers. They'd like to own a home here, but they can't afford it. So most of these people are commuting into town. So if you look at what they earn, trunks are about $30,000. These are nurses' aides, retail clerks, winery workers. Trunks are $50,000, maintenance workers, retail managers, postal clerks. And branches are $100,000. These would be like a HR manager, a paralegal, or a dental hygienist. And then we look at what they can afford in St. Helena. If you figure 1/3 of the income, a root can spend about $861 on a 2-bedroom apartment. In-town apartments rent from $1,200 to $1,500. Trunks at $50,000 could spend about $1,400, but 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartments are usually running about $18 to $25. And branches could spend up to $2,600, but most 3-bedroom, 2-baths, which are mostly houses here, are renting for $3,000 to $4,000. And you figure about buying a house, a branch who is making $150,000 household income can only afford about half what the median price of a house was in St. Helena. This is for June 2015. The mean price was $885,000. So you can see a tremendous gap here. We're also losing our rentals. If you look at the census figures for 2010, we had 538 rental units. We gained 18 with Magnolia Oaks. We lost 48 with Grandview. There's 8 projected with Turley coming on board next year. And so in 2016, we're going to have 22 fewer rental units than we had in 2010. In addition to that, if you look at the income qualified complexes, these are places where are subsidized rent, and they rent from about $450 to $1,300, 1 to 4 bedrooms. If you look at the 3 here, Stonebridge and Hunts Grove and St. Helena, and the Calistoga Family Apartments, which just opened in January, newly built, each of these has almost as many people on the waiting list, almost as many families on the waiting list as they have apartments available. Craigslist, this is from August 26, 15. It goes up and down, but on this particular day, there were no studios or 1-bedrooms. There were 2 2-bedrooms that ran from $1,675 and $3,950, and there was 1 4-bedroom for $42. So there are just not enough rentals in St. Helena, and the ones we have are very expensive. We're also losing housing stock. No one knows for sure how many second homes or vacation rentals there are. I've heard that there's more than 25%, but I've never been able to justify that. But if there was only 15%, that means another 416 housing units are out of circulation for local residents. If it's 25%, that's almost 700. There's 2,800 housing units in St. Helena. We're losing employee housing stock at a significant rate. Here's a picture of a house that sold in 2013 for $525,000. It was redone and sold in 2015 for $1,565,000. This house sold in 2011 for $525,000. It was torn down and rebuilt, and it sold in 2014 for $2,600,000. It was sold to a family they are from Europe. And according to the neighbor across the street, they've been here twice since they purchased it. This is in Sylvaner, a house that sold in 2012 for $685,000, and it resold last year for $1.7 million. These were 2 homes on this lot, and sold for $799,000 in 2012. our town tried desperately to buy this lot. It currently is for sale for $2.5 million as a single-family home with a guest house and a pool behind it. The problem with these, I don't have a problem with people developing these properties. The problem is that they will never be employee housing again. And so unless we make an effort to balance this growth, including ones that you approve every 2 weeks here, like we saw tonight, good projects, good people, but we have to start balancing this growth with providing some deed-restricted housing in St. Helena. Another way to look at that is the employee-to-resident ratio. This is a formula that the census does every 10 years, and it's a complicated formula where they take the total population and the total workers, how many people live here and work here, how many people live here and work someplace else, et cetera, et cetera. And it comes up with the fact that 78% of the workforce in St. Helena don't live here. They commute in. So that gives us an employment to resident ratio of 2.16. So if you compare our ratio to other communities around us, we are significantly higher. Sonoma's at 1.87. They're the only one who's even close to us. And our ratio has grown by 20% between the 2000 and 2010 census, and no one else has even grown by 10%. And then you look at us compared to other resort areas. We're right up there with Carmel and Coronado. We have become a resort town. So everyone keeps talking about the small town character and keep St. Helena, St. Helena. And by allowing this housing to be depleted, we are changing the character of our town. There's a lack of volunteers for civic participation, things like coaching Little League or working at the Harvest Festival. You find a lot of gray hair in the service clubs. There's a huge socioeconomic gulf now in our schools. We have very rich and we have very poor. We're losing our middle class. It's difficult to attract employees. Professionals, you can't get any general practitioners to work at the hospital because they can't afford to buy a house here. And the low-wage hospitality and winery workers, which are increasing significantly, can't find rentals. There's a 6-unit rental building in St. Helena that just evicted all 6 tenants. They're going to renovate the building and increase the rents. One family that was evicted from that is a family with a grandmother, a mother, and a son. 3 generations, all born and raised here. They've lived in this building for 15 years. The grandmother has worked at a local pharmacy for 27 years. The mother and the son both work at Safeway for a number of years. They have to be out on October 1st, and they have looked everywhere, and they have no place to go. These are long-term St. Helena residents who cannot afford to live here anymore. So that's 3 more people who will be commuting into town. So the most important thing is that the people who are working here and not living here, they're not engaged in our community. They're not doing the things like serving on the planning commission or working with the schools. They're doing that in their own communities, and it's beginning to show. There's also an economic impact. At what point will the lack of housing affect the quality of customer service and winery forces? And I talked to one very successful vintner here, and he said what keeps him up at night is why will people continue to drive up 29 to his very exclusive winery when they can do similar things in Napa and not have to fight the traffic up here. So, I mean, we're getting very close to the point where the traffic up valley is going to affect the economic development of the valley, economic vitality of our community. So we have a 2-pronged approach, and we'd like to ask the city to get involved in this. One is to preserve existing housing. We need to deed restrict houses, and we need to we need to have more restricted rentals. And the other is to build. The only way we can see to build new housing for home ownership is with self-help, and then we need more income qualified rentals. So deed restricting existing houses is something that has not been done yet. We think it's something that could happen. You have to look at it not as a market rate deal, but as an investment. If you bought an existing house in St. Helena, like this one's on the market for $800,000, and you then turned around and sold it to a dual income family or a one income family that's making $125,000 a year, and you sold it to them for $550 or $600, and deed restricted it for 50 years, that house would stay affordable for a trunk or a branch in St. Helena. It would cost maybe $200,000, but you could never build a new house for $200,000. You can't even buy the land for it if you could find it here. So it's an investment in the community, and will start to maintain the balance in the community. Maintain existing moderate rate apartments. Here's another unit, not the one I talked about people being evicted from, but another 8 units that's on the market now for $2.3 million. Most of the rental stock in St. Helena was built 30 years ago. It needs renovation, and as these buildings sell, they'll turn over and there will be higher rents. So we need, as a community, not just the city, but as a community, we need to find ways to purchase and rehab, not all, but some of these buildings, so we keep a balance of income qualified rentals in the existing rental stock. The Mutual Self-Help Program, which I think you all are aware of, we are in the process of building 8 units on land that was donated by the city. This is a self-help project. The participants themselves commit to 2,600 hours of labor. That's 40 hours a week over a year, and that accounts for about 65% of the construction cost. So that sweat equity reduces the overall cost of their home and also counts as their down payment. So this is for low-income residents. We've got 48 applications for the first 8 units. We have money from the USDA Rural Development to build 18 mutual self-help houses. The first 8 are on McCorkle, and we're looking for land to build the remaining 10. This is just a very rough concept drawing that shows that there's 8 townhouses, 2 stories, 3 bedrooms, 1.5 bath with garages on McCorkle. Farm worker family housing is also greatly needed. This has to be a partnership with local landowners, city and county, Rural Community Assistance Corporation, and our town, St. Helena. We have a couple of these that we're looking at now, some in the ag preserve and some on non-ag preserved land. The funding process, here's an example of what a 12-unit complex looks like with a community garden and a community room. They're nice looking. I mean, they look like they're not shanty-like apartments. The way this works is for our particular project, we have $1 million in Rural Development 514 funding. That's a 1% loan. The people who would rent would have a program called Rural Development 521, which guarantees that they won't pay more than 33% of their rent, which is very important for the farm workers. It requires contributions from county and city. It's a syndication process, and we can only make this work if we have donations of land in the form of a long-term lease or a donation. We're working with a couple of wineries right now to try to make this work. So that's kind of where we are now. It's pretty dismal. It's been bad for 10 years. It's gotten worse every year, and this is the first time we've ever been allowed to speak to a public body about this, except in public comment. One reason why we think it's really important now is because there's several hotel projects that are in the works right now, and we think that this is the opportunity that we will not have again to leverage these projects to get employee housing. It's a real balancing act. I mean, we know we need the city revenue, but the quality of life will change significantly if we double or triple the number of hotel rooms that we have in St. Helena. The hotels that you approve this year and next year, they're not going to have an impact on the city revenues in the short term. None of these will all take 1 to 2 years to be developed. But the projects themselves will have a long-term impact on our community in as far as incremental employees, traffic, et cetera. And so this is a time that we can leverage these developers. There's two ways to do that in our estimate, but you might have other ways to do this. The housing impact fees. This is a list of the published housing impact fees for the Napa County towns. We haven't been able to figure out a way to compare a $1,500 per room with a 1.4 per square foot, because a 1.4 per square foot is for all commercial development. So we're trying to figure out how to do that, and we haven't found anybody who can do that yet, but maybe Noah and Aaron can crack that nut. So our impact fees right now are low. Napa County raised theirs to $9 per square foot, and the city of Napa is trying to do that as well. They're getting significant blowback from realtors and developers, but that's in the works right now. The other way to do this is negotiated concessions. Any requirements for rezoning or other variances can initiate a concession for affordable housing. And people have done a good job on that. Yachtville has the highest housing impact fees in the county, and they've built 56 units in the past 7 years. We've built 16. Bardesano is an example. They had 62 hotel rooms that they completed in 2010. The town of Yachtville required them to donate 1.25 acres and also make a financial contribution. And then the town partnered with Napa Valley Community Housing to build the units. The Yachtville Hotel, which is George Altamir's hotel, had a similar requirement in exchange for increasing the rooms from 50 to 82. So the owner built and operated himself 25 units on 1.25 acres that he donated. And he's able to reserve 13 of those units for his own employees as long as they're income eligible. So these are two hotels that wanted to build, and as a part of that process were literally made to build affordable housing. In Calistoga, who, by the way, just opened a 48-unit farm worker housing rental this year, and they just purchased land last month for a 31-unit senior housing development in Calistoga. The city itself purchased the land. Solage, the city required them to build 24 units. They provided Calistoga affordable housing with a little over an acre and a pad-ready lot, so most of the pre-development was done. And then CAH partnered with Burbank to build 24 low-income units. Again, this was done as a concession for the variances that they were given. Here's two that didn't do very good, and we could put Grandview up here too. Silver Rose has got 84 rooms with full amenities and 21 private homes. The city's going to get less than $500,000 in affordable housing impact fees for this. Calistoga Hills, which used to be the Enchanted Resort, was voter approved in 2012. These are both approved by the city. These are both entitled. That's 110 rooms, 20 villas, and 13 custom homes. And the city's going to get less than $600,000 in affordable housing impact fees. These both were approved at a time when Calistoga was having significant financial problems. And so they approved these hotels, and they said, well, we'll make it up when we get the TOT tax from these hotels. So there's almost 200 rooms with less than $1 million in affordable housing. I don't think this is the way that we should do it here. We'd like to say that each developer we know that each developer is going to come to you and illustrate the specific impact of their project. And we know that there's 3 developers who have projects in the works now and have talked to almost every city council member and every planning commissioner. They've talked to me. They want to build these hotels rooms. It would be a total of 210 rooms if all 3 of these projects were approved. I'm not here to say whether they're good projects or bad projects, but if we built those rooms, that would double the number of rooms in St. Helena. And if we're going to do that, and we're going to build 200 hotel rooms, and the average for a moderate price hotel, not a luxury hotel, but a moderate price hotel is 1.5 employees per hotel room. And a luxury hotel is 2 employees per hotel room. But if you figure we're going to build 200 hotel rooms, that's 300 incremental employees. 300 incremental employees in St. Helena. Now, we can talk about whether there's already a restaurant or that they'll, do this or they'll do that. But if we're going to make that kind of impact on the housing and transportation, you have to make sure that we leverage it fully and not be scared because we don't have any money until we have to do this right now or we're not going to have any money. We have to use this opportunity to get housing funds. There's currently 2,400 new hotel rooms in development in 19 hotels in Napa County. In this is included 70 rooms at Grandview. It includes the Vineland Station rooms that are approved but not built, and it includes the 80 rooms at the end of St. Helena, Ted's project, that's conceptual. This information is coming from Visit Napa Valley. And you can see that the major hotel growth is in the city of Napa, and then significant growth in St. Helena and Calistoga based on the population size. So the word is out. St. Helena wants hotels now. After 10 years saying, no, we only want green grass and swimming pools, we're saying that we want hotels. So there's going to be a lot of proposals in front of you besides the 3 that are there now. And we'd like to see you make a long-range decision, not a short-term revenue decision. One perspective is to say, what's the annual TOT revenue that's needed to balance the city's budget in the future? And then how many hotel rooms or expansion of existing hotels do we need to make these goals? These aren't exact numbers. And so realistic, I don't think the city's going to approve more than 2 or 3 new hotel projects in the next 3 or 4 years. I mean, that would be like maybe 200, 300 rooms. So let's make sure that we leverage these to maximize this competitive process. We would suggest that the city, and we'd like to see the Planning Commission start this process, develop a long-term plan for hotel development in St. Helena. So we're not looking at individual projects, but we're looking at the overall need and how best to serve that. We'd like to see you set both mandated and preferred criteria for developers, and we'd like to see you investigate raising the housing impact fee on both residential and commercial development. And that's all we got. We've given you a document called a fact base, which is a start in gathering the information, sourced information on hotel development. This is not just for us. We'd like to see this become part of the process so that we're making decisions based on the actual data for the county. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can we have questions? If there are any.
It's not a public hearing. It's intended as an informational presentation.
All right, perfect. If you have any questions, email Mary privately, please.
So there can be no discussion on this?
No, this was just an informational.
Do you want to give your email address or some way to contact someone?
I was under the impression that this was going to be a discussion about what we can do on this. So we have to agendize again to come back and say, how do we do this?
This was agendized as an informational presentation. The Planning Commission didn't indicate that they were going to be discussing or creating a plan for this at this time. So it would be appropriate based on the Brown Act requirements.
So what do I have to do to get some discussion going within the city government on housing in St. Helena and the effect on hotels?
Council should initiate that discussion.
The council told us to come to the Planning Commission. The Mayor Galbraith said to take this to the Planning Commission.
Which is what we did.
And so now what do we do?
Well, if you'd like to if the commission would like to initiate a discussion about formulate this commission, formulating a study group, as you've indicated, the commission could direct staff to do that and we could begin that process.
And so that has to be agendized before they can do that?
In order for the public to fully understand what the commission's going to discuss and be a part of the process, yes, per the Brown Act requirements.
So then I have to contact the individual commissioners and say, well, you put this on your agenda to discuss this. Is that, I'm just trying to get this process.
So
I thought that's what we were doing tonight.
That wasn't clear to me, or otherwise, I'm sorry for the miscommunication. I thought you wanted to present this information to the Planning Commission. That's how it was agendized based on our discussions. I didn't understand that you were looking for a broader discussion of that.
It's very disappointing because we have been trying to get this going for a long time. Mayor Galbraith said bring this to the Planning Commission.
Which is what we've done.
So I think what we can do and still not violate the Brown Act is discuss, do we want to put this on a future agenda as a future agenda item to discuss.
Well,
So
and can't we also say that we would like to see a task force? I mean, why is that a problem to say yes?
that's not a problem either.
not
to
a
say what
problem
we
at all.
want on this. So I think based on the presentation, which by the way is so greatly appreciated, I would like to have some sort of direction given to NOAA tonight on how we want to move forward with this. Do we want to create a task force? Do we want to just start a public hearing?
However, any goals pushed by the planning commission have to be in
Right.
keeping with what the council has told us to work on.
Okay.
And
So
what
the
has
council wants us
told
to
you
see
work
it.
on?
Well, the council set goals at their goal-setting mission or meeting in January. Those are publicly available on the webpage. I'd happy to discuss them.
And there's no housing in those goals. And what we're trying to do is say that these hotels are going to come before you. There's 3 right now, and you've all seen the plans for them. And unless the city sets up a way that you can encourage or command housing as a part of these hotel processes, we're going to lose this opportunity. So if we keep screwing around and saying do this, do that, there's another one. The city's making a decision about putting hotels in residential areas in 2 weeks. And we all know why they're doing that.
Noah, can't we take the information we've learned tonight and when those projects are coming up, have that, because the projects will be on the agenda, why can't we then, as we're discussing them, have those be part?
I think that
of
what
course
Mary's
can.
asking for, though, she's asking for us to come up with a plan before the hotel projects are before us, so that we have like the Highway 29 Main Street plan that we have in place. I think that am I correct in that assumption? Yeah.
I mean, all the several people who have conceptual plans have talked to us like they've talked to everybody else, and they know that they need to do something, and unless the city formulates a plan, particularly for variances, I mean, it's.
Okay, so then
The
no,
city
my question
council has to direct staff to,
does
to
okay.
begin
So
that
does
process.
this? Okay, so the city council. No, the city council has asked Mary to come to us on this, but did they give any other instructions?
They did not discuss that with me. That was
Okay,
Mary,
so then
Mary,
as the chair of the planning commission, I would like to ask the city council what they would like us to do with the information that Mary has provided so that we can move forward on this. So if that, I'm doing that right now. So
Can we make any kind of recommendation to the city council?
no,
on
because this
issue?
wasn't an actionable item.
not today.
So I would like to ask the city council what they would like us to do with this information. Thank you.
And can we ask that this conversation be moved to October 6th and put on that agenda as an actionable discussion point? So then it
Staff
gets on the
cannot commit to. It's not even clear what Mary's requesting from my perspective, and council has not directed staff to begin that process. So I cannot commit to starting to work on that at this time.
I have a question. Is there anything in the commercial building stuff that is comparable to what's in building residential developments, where they have to build so much affordable housing in order to do this?
All development projects pay affordable housing impact fees.
Yeah.
The requirements that Mary was indicating that were required in other cities, I would imagine, were negotiated through development agreements.
Okay.
They are.
They are.
Okay.
So that's kind of back to my question, that if specific projects come up before us, that's when we're discussing a development plan. So
And-
can't those be tackled somewhat project by
Yes.
project? I know
Of
that's
course.
not what Mary wants to see,
course.
but what I don't want to see is this just becomes this big circle that nothing ever happens, which I think
And
there's a
bury
lot-
our heads in the sand.
Right, and so if we can if we in fact have projects, we have the latitude at that moment in time to say, for this project, we'd like to see this. That doesn't mean it's a broader plan, it doesn't mean it's a policy statement for citywide, so that's not a city council issue, that's just a
Yeah,
project by
you're
project.
absolutely right. I think that though the issue that Mary is concerned about is that it's going to be like you're not paying
Of course you can do that. Again, this is getting broader than the item was indicated. I apologize to our town, St. Helena. It was indicated to me that they wanted to give an informational presentation. That's what was scheduled and agendized. We didn't have broad discussion, or I wasn't aware that there was a desire to have a discussion with the commission at a formally noticed public hearing.
I think at this point, again, I'm just going to reiterate, can you please ask City Council what they would like to provide us direction with what they want us to do with this information? I think that's the most
And then think we should agendize it
And then once that,
right away.
and then once you provide that direction, can you please put it on the next available agenda item? All right, moving on to the department report. An opportunity for staff to report on or update the commission on any relevant matters.
So we have the short-term rental neighborhood meeting or town hall meeting scheduled for next Wednesday, the 23rd. It'll be in this room, 5 to 7, asking for public participation and input on the short-term rental issue. Other than that, nothing else to report.
Perfect. Not the joint city council or the planning commission.
You have those on our notes.
Yeah, they're on the next page.
I'm sorry. So we do have a joint city council planning commission scheduled sometime in October. I do not have a firm date for that yet. It'll be a council date, not a commission date. So start to look at that for your calendars. Please notify staff if you have any input or you can't make either date. I believe Commissioner Kitchener has already indicated that she will not be available for
The first meeting.
of the planning commission. Does that let me know if you won't be available for the first council meeting?
I don't think I will.
Okay.
Okay, perfect.
I get back on the 16th.
All right.
I'll be gone from the 5th to the 16th, if that tells you anything.
Thank
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you very much, everyone. This was a very big meeting, but we got through it.
I'd like to ask Noah, I assume that we should not participate in this discussion, but we can sit and watch it, the short-term rental.
That's exactly right. It's intended to be an informational meeting for the citizens to provide input to staff on the issue. Of course, being in the room, if the commission was in the room, they'd have an opportunity to hear directly from the community versus having staff.
Report back to us.
That's exactly right.
Are we going to sit in the back, or?
It's my idea is that essentially staff will be at a table here. The room will be full. No one will be seated at the dais to try to keep it informal and open and make people feel comfortable. But again, depending on turnout, we may have to adjust the seating a little bit to accommodate the number of folks who show up.
Climb underneath here, huh?
But yeah, so we're right now basically in the remainder of this week and early next week, we're going to formalize the format, the process, the presentations, all those things. But again, it's strictly informational, no decisions, just to basically allow citizens a chance to provide some direct input to
We
staff.
all need to attend.
All right, well, perfect. Thank you so much. And this meeting is adjourned.
I thought we got to that meeting in a